Hi, my name is Michael, this is The Slice, and in today's episode we're talking to Frank Meilack. So today we are talking to Frank Meilack. Hi Frank, how are you? You all right?
I'm pretty good, Michael. Nice to talk to you.
Good, you too. I'm really looking forward to today's chat. So the rule of The Slice is you get 20 minutes to talk about your business, your personal life, whatever. It's 20 minutes to do whatever you want to do. Is that right? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Good.
So I'm going to set the timer now, and the 20 minutes has started. So first of all, Frank, for anybody that doesn't know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm Director of Community Engagement for Memoria, the national funeral organisation. We've got 10 sites around the UK. They service 10 different communities in various parts of the country. And I think my role really does what it says on the bottle, which is to engage with those communities and make sure that everybody's got access to quality, affordable facilities when they come to arranging their end-of-life circumstances.
I can imagine that is quite, I wouldn't say a stressful job, or maybe it is a stressful job, but I suppose that is a very draining job because you're working constantly with emotions, especially people with high emotions. How would you describe the industry in which you're working in?
Yeah, what a good question, because obviously it's been changed dramatically with this recent situation, and people's attitudes towards death and dying were very slowly beginning to change. This situation has really put it out there, the amount of people that have been affected and have suddenly been confronted with loss and grief. So, but in the run-up to that, I think one of the problems in the UK in particular is that people's unwillingness to actually talk about the subject matter. Many cultures, and nationally I deal with lots and lots of different cultures: Hindu, Sikhs, Muslims, Jews, West Indians, Africans, and actually most of those communities, they're quite willing to talk openly. It's really this sort of British ethnicities that don't. And when you approach the subject of have you prepared for later life, do you want to consider a funeral plan, have you thought about a will, they close down. The growth in products like the death cafes and things like that beginning to sort of open doors and make people a little bit more open to discussing it. But I do think very sadly that this recent situation where so many people have been, in the first instance, confronted with the illness, secondly, an inevitability of losing somebody, and then thirdly, and very sadly, realising that there's a cost attached to this, and they were unprepared, they hadn't thought it through. That they may have borrowed money. There is an issue of funeral poverty in the UK, and it's all very sad. And to avoid that in the future, amongst the many lessons that need to be learned from this sort of COVID-19 situation, is that I need to think that one through, because I could just start putting a very small amount away and making preparation perhaps for grandparents or aging parents or whatever, and avoid that additional distress and upset that can be caused by situations that are avoidable.
Do you think a lot of people have changed a mindset towards death now we've actually have gone through such a pandemic that a lot of generations have never had to face before? Because there's obviously a lot of generations now that won't have been around during the war, that wouldn't have remembered that upset of how life changed. This is the first major pandemic that most generations have ever had to deal with. Do you think mindsets are going to change, and do you think they're going to change for the better?
Yes, I think they will. It may still take a little bit of time, but one of the unfortunate legacies that this will leave behind is there will be situations where people were perhaps, let's say, unmarried, had young children. We'd have seen that many of the people that have been affected by this, it's not just the old generation. There have been quite a number of younger people affected by this. And if they were in that position, they're going to have the whole legal aspect of probate, their estate being frozen for what may be a considerable time now, because everybody's still sort of on lockdown. These issues are going to take a long time to sort out, and in the short term, children need to be provided for, bills need to be met. And it's the element of surprise, I guess, really in there, where they hadn't thought about these things, thought it would never happen to them. I guess we're all sort of quite relaxed and we all think that, but you can never say that. And I think if amongst the lessons that will be learned, certainly if you're just make a will, go to something like My Wishes and feel free to express what your wishes are, make plans and think, well, if this happens to me, this is what I want to happen. And also, much more importantly, don't think about it like, oh, well, it won't be a problem for me because I won't be here. Really think that through, because the impact is on those that are left behind. Really, really important, especially if you've got children.
It's funny that you say that, because I will hold my hands up high and say, well, I'm not going to be here. And I think that's maybe just a youthful mind, and the way young people perceive the fact that they think they're going to be around forever. So that's quite interesting. Maybe a mindset changes as you get older and you start seeing more and more people, leave, more and more people passing. I think that obviously changes a lot of people's mindsets. We've spoken briefly in the past that that obviously I filmed a sitcom set and a funeral directors. Over the last 12 years, I've had this project in my mind, and we've filmed it and stuff. So I think I completely get it a lot more than your average Joe would get it off the street. But with the industry changing so much, do you think there's going to be a bigger integration with video, or is this just, because we're seeing across the country loads of funerals where they're now doing video links, where they're getting the ceremonies filmed. Do you think that this is going to be a long-term thing, or do you think after lockdown that's going to disappear? What are your thoughts?
I do think it's here, this technology, it's here and it's here to stay. And that's a good thing. I think, the funeral industry is steeped in tradition, sort of arguably created by the Victorians. And you've also had this sort of Victoriana with the coach and horses and all of the dressing in black and all the rest of it. And I sort of summed this up recently, where I think only as recently as about 15 years ago, if a young person stood up in mid-service and started to use like a phone or perhaps an iPad and was FaceTiming it or something like that, only about 15 years ago, people would have probably, and arguably quite rightly, said, "Oh, that's so undignified, yet so inappropriate. Stop it, please sit down and switch your phone off or switch your iPad off." Move forward 15 years and people have been doing that, and people accept it as normal. So it's become like normality.
So do you actually see people getting their phones out and actually filming ceremonies? Is that for people that can't attend, or is it just they want something for their Instagram account? What's that about?
Yeah, a very good question. And I think it's because if we look at the explosion of digital photography, since the smartphone has come into our lives and everybody can take a photo of everything, and then the dawning of social media sites like Instagram, like Facebook and that, it has become actually normalised now to photograph absolutely everything. Awful though it is to say, when there's an incident on the road or a motorway or in a town centre, the first thing people think now is to get their phone out and take pictures of it or film it. So sadly, it's really no different with a funeral on that. So for whatever reason, it's seen as normal. That said, on a more positive note, I don't think it's a bad thing, because I have no footage or films of my parents' funerals, which were both within the last 3 years. And that's quite sad. I don't have an end-of-life legacy to look at, a website or anything that I can turn to, perhaps wherever I am on my mother's birthday or my father's birthday, or maybe at Christmas time or something like that. Something that I could look at from a technology perspective and think, oh, I remember that. Yeah, I'd like to look back at that. So I think videos of funerals and being able to stream them, and if you've put together an end-of-life presentation that you deliver at the service, which of course you can do at all of our locations, you will have invested a lot of time, effort and money in that, and it's very, very special. And if it's delivered to perfection and gives you the closure that you want, why would you not want that as a memory?
Yeah, I know that, because obviously I've done a lot of research for myself, as a filmmaker, and a lot of companies, especially down south, do offer, the funeral to be filmed, by a production company, and you do end up with a DVD of the day. So, but and I get that, and I think everyone's different, and everybody wants something to remember their loved ones by. But surely, you want to remember a loved one when they were alive, not when they were going to their final resting place. I mean, I suppose everybody's different in that respect, but do you think that is a growing trend, that people will want to watch back a funeral?
That would need to be divided. It's a great question again, into cultures. In West Indian and African culture and other cultures like that, that is absolutely normal. Wherever you go in the world and you'll see one of their funerals, you won't just see a camera, you will see a film crew. And they will be setting up the cameras on stanchions and so on, and they will film the whole thing through for the community, because the beliefs, certainly in the Muslim world and in some other, like the Sikh world, the Hindu world, their beliefs are that a funeral service is the responsibility and involves the community, not just the family. And that's why they do that. They share it. I don't think it will become the norm, but what will become the norm is that what the service should be, and most people's attitudes have changed towards this now, is a celebration of life. And the delivery of the sort of 4 or 5 minute PowerPoint presentation in the service, which, cradle to grave photographs, the history of that person's successes, what they've done in their lives, where they lived, who they were, all of that. If it's done well and it's presented brilliantly on the day, it is an amazing thing. That it goes a long way to helping you overcome your grief and get through the journey of bereavement.
Yeah. No, and do you know what? Everybody deals with death differently. I know it's funny, since I personally went down the road of filming Morbid and working on that, it obviously opened up my eyes a lot to how that industry works. Because beforehand I didn't know any funeral directors. I didn't really know how the business worked. I suppose naively I just thought, well, that would be an interesting situational comedy. And actually looking back, I look at it and go, wow, there's so much there that I didn't know beforehand. And it is quite interesting that we're constantly changing, and I think you're right. I think there was a little village somewhere, or I can't remember where they actually do dig up the bodies, dress them up, and they have like a festival weekend. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. I'm not entirely sure where the information came from, but I remember reading an article where there is a village or a town where they do dig up loved ones, and then they dress them up, and they have like a celebration of Death Day.
Yeah, it's called the Day of the Dead. It stems from Mexico. Okay. It's a very Latin American thing. And if you actually just Google Day of the Dead, don't put Mexico in, you'll see a lot of countries doing that now, where they celebrate the day that somebody died, like some sort of birthday or anniversary. Wow. Just look that up and it will explain the whole thing to you. But again, it's the way they believe that is helping them on their journey along the road of grief, because if somebody passes, the day after the funeral, that's not the end of it. You think, okay, that's all sorted now. It's not like that at all.
Why do you think us Brits are so kind of not accepting of death, and why we don't want to talk about it? I mean, I know things are getting a lot better with the programs like Afterlife. We're talking more about death now, but why is it such a big issue over here?
Very, very good question. And I'm not sure that even here I'll have the perfect answer for you, but no one wants to, everybody wants to remain positive. They don't want to think of that awful situation. You see a door with the word death on it. And do you open it and look through, or do you go past? Well, I can explain that one, because I worked in a very big cemetery in London, on one of the main arteries into London. Yeah. And when I was networking, as you know that I do, and go around these community groups, they'd say, well, what do you do? Well, I'm from where I used to work on this main bypass. And, oh, I know that. That's great, that place. Yeah. And I've been past it thousands of times. And I said, well, have you never been in? Oh, no, it's a cemetery. Why would I want to? When actually it was one of the nicest parks you could possibly ever wish to be in. Beautiful grounds and everything, but just a real reluctance to talk about it. And this country, it's not in a good place, never has been really, with mental health. I mean, and there is a sort of a link, because a lot of people's mental health issues, especially when they've suffered loss and bereavement, born of the fact that they never wanted to talk about it, and they never knew what to expect. And when you do lose somebody close to you, it has a massive impact on you in lots of different ways. Everybody's grief is really personal, depends on obviously on your relationship with the person. But generally, because it's a good relationship, you don't know what to expect when they die. And it's born of the fact that you never wanted to talk about it when they were alive. So it's really, really important to have these conversations. It's a healthy thing to do, and it's good for everybody's mental health.
So you've not always been within that trade before. Tell us a little bit about Frank before he got into all of this, and tell us a little bit more about what you did beforehand.
Well, I studied photography at school, and I had an eye for it. I loved it,
Yeah.
And back in those heady days of the 1970s, I had options when I left school. Wanted to be a photographer, but of course it would have been freelance, and I had some qualifications. And my parents at the time said, "Oh no, you want to go into a job where they pay you a steady wage, something secure, And they convinced me that I should go into banking, which was probably the worst decision I ever made, really, because I was never cut out to be a banker. I've always had sort of sales blood in me, like looking to get out and to be in front of people. And anyway, it was what it was. So between sort of for 8 years, I was in banking, and I ended up redundant from banking. We had the recession of the late 80s, and I've always been, I guess, I would diversify and do anything, and I went into lorry driving. Mm-hmm. So, I was driving a big truck around the East End of London for 5 years.
I take my hat off to anybody that drives in London. I've done it a fair few times, but to be fair, I wouldn't like to do it again.
But even and being in transport, I decided to, how far could I go in transport? So I studied. I got my CPC, which is, for those that don't know, is a certificate of professional competence at the time, which teaches you all the stuff you need about lorries and trucks and things like that. And I broke into transport management. So that was my first break into transport, or into management, really. And then beyond that, I used that experience as a manager to look for other opportunities. And I got a job as a sort of a dispatch manager at a huge dry cleaning processing plant in North London. Now, it sounds like a strange place to work, but it was actually it was a top-end brand name. I won't name it, okay. But in the Harrods bracket, if you like, of dry cleaning. And it serviced not all just the gentry and all the rest of it around the London area, but royalty. Lady Diana's clothes used to come through. Princess Charlotte's clothes used to come through. And what used to happen, this was a massive factory with a good few hundred people working in it. If the alarm bells went, it wasn't a fire. It meant that somebody important, like royalty or a prime minister or something like that, their clothes had arrived and it had to stop, and theirs had to go to the front. And
well, what happened if there was a fire?
Well, it was a different alarm. But it also, the vans that we had that used to go out and about, they used to drive around all of the TV news presenters' houses and all the rest of it around the London area, because all of those guys on the telly, they have a budget for their clothes. That's why you see them in different clothes every day. So the drivers would visit them every week, collect their dry cleaning, deliver the other stuff back, and so on and so forth. So strangely enough, I was working in the shop once, covering behind Harrods in the Pont Street shop, and Donald Trump's first wife came in. And we had a conversation just about the weather and, whether she was happy and all this, that and the other. Way before, this is 30 years before he became, president of the USA. And, obviously they divorced. Rowan Atkinson come in, and a number of other people like that. So that was an interesting few years working in there. But of course, you couldn't stand on ceremony and say, "Give me your autograph" or anything like that. You could treat them like normal customers. And from there on, I got a job in outdoor advertising. So actually was responsible for building 17,000 bus shelters around London and the South East, and in some other major cities around the UK. And the poster that's behind you there, Morbid, would be classed as what they call small format 6-sheet, and we used to put 78,000 of those up every week when we were into paper posting in 48 hours.
Wow, that's quite an achievement.
Yeah, and I was in outdoor media, operationally, sales and development for the best part of 20 years.
Wow. So you're quite fully rounded in the fact that you've had a lot of experiences as well, haven't you, really?
Yeah.
So would you say that where you are now is where you're happy to be?
Yeah, it's really interesting because after that, I actually went to America for a while, but just to settle myself down, I had some domestic circumstances that didn't work out. And then when I came back to the UK, I was, for want of a better word, really an operations manager. So I was looking for a role as an operations manager. An agency saw that, they sort of come after me, and I was interviewed 3 times. They said nothing about the funeral industry. It was, what have you done in operations? What do you know about budgets, finance, people, HR, all of that sort of stuff. And then on the 3rd interview, they told me it was in the funeral industry and they'd like me to go and meet the staff at this park. And, I don't know whether I went one way or the other at that point, but I went along, and it was a stunning place. Loved I think, well, how could you not be happy working here? At that point, I was, I guess, unaware of whether or not I had any empathetic bones in my blood or anything. And it subsequently turns out I had these empathetic bones that I didn't know I had. And I embraced that for 4 years, dealing with hundreds and hundreds of families, that were coming in all sorts of different situations, all who had suffered loss from loads of different cultures.
There's your timer. Do you know what? I actually knew before the interview that, we'd get so engrossed in the conversation that the timer would cut you up somewhere. How did you find that?
I really enjoyed it.
Did you enjoy it? Should we do it again? Should we
really,
set another 20 minutes?
Do you think anybody's going to watch a video on LinkedIn that's 40 minutes long?
No, it's hard push to get them to watch 20, to be honest, but
yeah.
But no, I've really enjoyed that. Thank you very much for obviously taking the time to chat with me today. And when the episode does go out, I'm pretty sure you'll get a lot of traction from it. Thank you so much for coming on, and I'm glad you've enjoyed it. If anybody would like to watch any previous episodes, you can head over to youtube.com/TakeTheCakePro. If you'd like to subscribe, you'll get all the latest videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all soon.